Okay, there's another way to know that Moses is writing about and balancing to the millennium, which is even more striking than what I just showed you. You see in the top window what's probably becoming familiar now, the genius.xls. And this time I'm taking again, because Bible keeps doing that, and now so is Moses, taking you back to the flood. I want you to pay real close attention to that year. Again, the only way to get the right chronology is to go in terms of years from Adam's fall. And in the 1656th year from Adam's fall, the flood occurs. Okay? So, see, because that was Methuselah. See, Methuselah died in 1656 from Adam. You got that? Now watch. Moses is writing Psalm 90, and I didn't know this until I started doing Psalm 90, in 2706. Okay? Well, look at this. 2706 from Adam, when Israel's just about the end of the land, minus 1656, which is the flood, is, guess what? 1050. So Moses is also tracking to 1050 from the flood. Why? Because civilization started over at the flood. Why? Because verse 5 is going to start talking about reviewing the actors. You've seen this now. First the Adamic vote. See, we're down here at the bottom. Okay? We're down here at the bottom where I'm moving the screen. I'll talk about what's on top of the screen now in a few minutes. Okay? Right here at the bottom, verses 5 through 8 is a 70, and that's about the flood. See, you flood them. That's the first voting period when they got the news that they were going to be flooded. Okay, and then here's Seth. Alright, means to appoint, means appointed one. And that's what we saw up here. Okay, Seth. See? Wait a minute. See, Seth appointed. Okay, appointed to take the place of. Okay, but it isn't just appointed to take the place of, it's appointed to carry on the name of. Appointed, like in English, has a lot of different uses. Okay, so Moses is balancing what he says in 2706 here in Psalm 90 to 1050, 2706 minus the flood year is 1050. See, he's saying, hi, a civilization unit. Remember, time always has to be financed by someone carrying time. But at the same time, you're always balancing to real time, real elapsed time. See, it's like we're on a budget. We got a time budget. Okay? Did somebody mature by? Okay? Did somebody mature by? See, here's the 3,000. Did somebody mature by then? Because Abram's personal 1,000 is going to run out 46 years later. Civilization's third 1,000 begins here. Okay? In 3,100. Are we even going to get that far? We ain't getting that far if there isn't a David. David had to be crowned before that was going to even happen. And he's crowned and was equivalent to 3096. Phew! 4 years early. 4 years, that's real important. 4 years early. Just in time. 4 years early. 4 years early. It's really the end of, it's really close. You have to use 3 when you're doing the numbers, because it's near the end of. Okay? 3.5 years again. We keep coming up with this number. Okay? See, somebody has to carry time, and that somebody's going to now be David. Moses is looking down to that because, watch this. This just kills me. It just does. Again, Moses is writing Psalm 90 below, lower half of the screen, 2706 from Adam. Okay? That minus 1656, which is the year of the flood from Adam, is 1050. So, Moses is looking at how are we going to get to the next 1050, which ends 3100 in real time. He's reconciling to how we get there in real time. So how does he do that? He's taking the year he writes. This is so awesome. I almost want to kill myself. That's the year he writes, 2706 from Adam. Psalm 90, as we've seen, is 350 syllables. Okay, down here in the lower left-hand corner. Okay, so you add 350 there, and you get 3056. Okay, so that's what time would be at 3056. Okay, but we got a deadline of 3100. All right, so we're going to make it to the deadline. See, 3056 to 3100. Okay, so minus 3100 is 44 years. Are we going to make it? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. He's basically predicting yes. And how do you know that? Because 2706 plus 350 takes you to 3056. Now watch this very closely. Plus 1050 equals 4106. You know what that means? Messiah's birth. How do we know? Because he's writing it in 1400 BC. Plus, well, not plus, I have to do a minus because we have our screwed up accounting. Our BC dates are generally good. 1400 BC minus 350. Number of syllables, number of years. Takes you to what? 1050. And what happened in 1050? Ding, 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 ding. Israel rejected God as king. Okay, but what's 1050 years after that? What we should have been calling, 180. The end of, it's actually the end of, if there was such a thing as 0 BC, that's it. 1050 is 0 BC. 1050 years to count backwards, because we're counting backwards in our BC. That's when Christ has to be born. He has to be born. He has to be born, or time ends. See, it's another method of accounting. He's accounting this time from the flood. 1050 years earlier from when he writes is the flood, plus 350 years that Israel's got left to get to her goal. Really, it's more than 350, but she's got 350 years, at which point that's 1400, which is our BC. So now we're going to minus the 350 to get to make our BC calendar align. And it's 1050 BC when she rejects God as king and Saul is appointed. Now Paul goes through this very same accounting using the 490s instead of a 1050 in Acts 13:20 in the Greek. It's kind of screwball mistranslated in the English. It's very confusing. But he's basically saying, hi, this is the reimbursement for the 400 years of slavery and the 40 years in the wilderness and the 40 bad years under Paul. David is the reimbursement. Yeah, and he's born in 1040 BC. He becomes king over Hebron in 1010, which is 4 years early before the end of time. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here to talk about it. Because Israel rejected rejected him as God in 1050 BC. Now, 1050 BC just happens to be a really good number, because 1050 years later, he has to be born, because measured from the flood, he's got to be born by then, and you can see now why it ties. Okay, well, he's actually born. Remember, David is crowned. I gotta do this, or you're not gonna see it. David is crowned first in 3096. He's crowned king of all Israel in late 1004 BC. 1004 BC, and we got to call that 1003 for rounding purposes, because Kislev is, I suspect, the actual date, but it's still in the last 6 months of the year, so you have to round it off by one. So now, Christ has to be born. Okay, Christ has to be born by the end of the 1000th anniversary of David's united kingship. Otherwise, the time will run out. Okay? Now, you'll notice that 1050 BC, this is really the key to so many things that we don't understand. The 1050 BC here would mean that he'd have to be born by what we should call 0 BC. Well, but he's actually born 3 years prior. 3 years into. Why? Because David got crowned earlier. See, we see David. David gets crowned earlier, just before, and he had to be crowned earlier. Otherwise, civilization would have ended, because this was all bad time. All right, so this is the 40 years under Saul. David's crowned in Hebron because Saul died just in time. And then there's a 7-year civil war between here and here in row 102 when David is finally crowned king over all Israel. So Christ has to be born king of all Israel. So he has to be born by 1,000 years from 3103 from Adam. Okay, which he is. And that ends up being 3 years earlier than Moses' own accounting year. All right? Because Moses is doing the countdown to Messiah. And the 1,000 years are included in that. We've gone over that. But he's saying, hi, okay, I'm writing to you in the 1050th anniversary of the flood, which everybody would have known. 350 years from now, you're going to reject God as king. Well, I should do it backwards. Okay. Hi, I'm writing to you in the 1050th year from the flood. 350 years from now, you're going to reject God as king. Okay. And Messiah's got to be born 1050 years after that, or time ends. Now, 2450 just happens to be our BC equivalent to the flood. All right, so that's why the numbers are so similar. All right, because they're balancing there. But Christ had to be born 3 years earlier because of the other problem with David having to become king earlier, namely here, so that this civilization, the third 1000, could even play. See the interplay between the underlying 1000 protection that's based on an individual and how it has to reconcile and balance to the historical, absolute historical time. This is actually 3,000 years elapsing from Adam's fall. This is actually 3,100 elapsing from Adam's fall. There's an unbeliever voting window that has to play here. Well, it ain't going to happen if there wasn't somebody to carry time. That somebody is David. All right, so now the 3,100 in row 101 and G101, where my cursor is now, that can play. And, by the way, David becomes king of all Israel here in 3103, which is 3 years later. So Christ is going to have to be born within 1,000 years of that. But that ends up being 3 years prior to the elapse of 1050 years, 1050. From the the rejection. So Moses, now I'm going to talk about what I was doing this other thing for. Right up here, there is a quality, a rhetorical style that scholars don't know about, which is going to be of immense importance to textual criticism. We're always asking questions about when Bible books are written. Okay? Well, the author's date, they have the rhetorical style for dating when they write in the text. And you have to know the meter to know what that is. See, because Moses' meter is patterned after him writing in the 1050th anniversary of the flood. So the equidistance, so they all use this, and we'll be going through this in the other passages. They all use equidistance. Moses is writing in the 1050th anniversary of the flood. And there's 1050 years after his poem ends. Alright? Is Messiah's scheduled but not actual birth. Why? Because David matures 3 years earlier. Okay? And you can see why that would be important, because again, going back to Abraham, like I just covered, we got 54 years that have to be made up for the Gentiles. So even though there are 1050 more years after Moses finishes his poem, as far as a bank account allotment for Messiah to be born, there's this 54 owed to the Gentiles. That's 54. The last 50, okay, yeah, that's the harvesting period of the Gentiles, which I just covered. But we got another hanging chat of the 4 years. Well, that means that David's going to have to mature early. And again, it's really 3.5, so he's getting into his kingship really 3.5 years before the civilization ends at 3100. See, God is keeping real precise accounts of time here. I mean, frankly, if you had no other proof of God than the way he uses numbers in the Bible, and you studied the numbers like I'm showing you here, you'd have no doubt, because you know what? Only God can orchestrate time. Okay? There are a lot of dingbat scholars out there, but not all of them are dingbats. A lot of people know that David was crowned at Hebron in 1010 BC. The Jews are kind of screwed up about time now, but they didn't used to be so screwed up. And there are a lot of Christian scholars about 100 years ago, 50 years ago, who got this timeline right. They got the Exodus right at 1400 BC. They got the destruction of the temple right at 586 BC. They got it right that Moses left Egypt under Thutmose III. I mean, this was pretty common knowledge at the turn of the century, last century. All right? And that's one of the reasons why Cleopatra's Needle is in Central Park. Because it's talking about two Thutmoses there. The Thutmose who was friendly to Hatshepsut and the Thutmose who wasn't. And that's a stele. That's like a recorded history plaque, and it's sitting in Central Park. Egypt is trying to get it back now, but, it's sitting there. So, 100 years ago, the scholarship was really pretty good with respect to Egyptology and these BC dates. Okay? And I know where the AD dates went wrong. We're going to cover that in a later video. But the point I'm trying to make here is, you know what? We knew that it was 1010. We knew that it was, 1003. And so did Moses, and he's balancing to it. So you can prove from the math what was going on, and we can balance these two real events in history. So this isn't just, a lot of religious books, they play games with numbers too. Okay, but this is balancing to real history you can test. And this used to be commonly understood historical dating 100 years ago. All right, we have a lot of bad scholarship that's come along in the last 50 years that's trying to undo what we used to know. So you always have to look at everybody with a jaundiced eye and check it. And see, because 100 years ago we were actually trying to compare it to the Bible. We were actually trying to balance to the Bible. Today we're using the stupid-ass stars. Okay, this is really dumb. Anybody who's using stars to date anything at all is just a complete jerk. Just ignore them. Deuteronomy 18 forbids that. Forget the stars. Okay? God doesn't need stars. He's got his own word that you can use to date things. And if you're still using the stars, you're as apostate as possible. You need 1 John 1:9 to talk to Dad. Because something's really wrong with you if you're using stupid-ass stars. There was no Star of Bethlehem. God doesn't need astronomy or astrology to verify what he says. He's got a better way of doing it, and he's got it done in the Bible. And frankly, if you look at the Bible and then you go look at the valid scholarship that's been done over the past couple of 100 years, 300, 400, 500, 600 years, and you can tell the difference. It balances. Well, who but God can orchestrate time? I'm sorry. You don't want to believe in God, that's your prerogative. But honey, if you want to find 100% proof of God, you look at these numbers. And yeah, your eyes will glaze over. And yeah, it's worth it. And I figure you think it's worth it or you wouldn't be listening to me this long. So, let's go forward. So we know that Moses here is balancing to the last millennium by recourse to the first millennium, which is starting with Adam. Why? Because the last Adam is Christ. That's the millennium included there. Okay, return. Remember, I covered this already. Teshuv, shuvu, return. That's Jubilee. That's the essential meaning of Jubilee, which is the 50th year. Every 50th year in the Mosaic Law is Jubilee. And you're going to hear me talk more about that in the next video. Okay? So, shuvu, return. This is the word in Hebrew, shuvu. Yeah, everything returns to the last Adam, who returns to head up the millennium. And so Moses is counting down to the last Adam by referencing the flood from Noah, because that's when civilization started. And we have 1050 years from the time he finishes his poem to the birth of Messiah, who will inaugurate the millennium. 57 years, however, has to be inserted between Messiah's birth and the millennium, because David matures early too, 3 years early. So now, have a look. Okay, 56. Is this pregnant or what? I mean, only God can be this smart. Abraham, 54 years early, plus David, and it's, again, we'll just do it right this time. Abraham is 53.5 years early. You've seen that now. Okay, but David also becomes king 3.5 years before the civilization unit runs out. You've seen that. See the total? 57. Ding, 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 ding. So Messiah has to die 57 years before 4200. And that was what I just showed you. 4143 from Adam is when he has to die. Now you know why. Now you know Moses is balancing to that. And now we're going to see how Isaiah does the same thing.